My husband of 12 years asked for a hall pass for his birthday. I remember the air leaving my lungs as I tried to laugh it off. But the real betrayal wasn't his question. It was discovering who he had already invited to join him. It's funny how the loudest moments of your life are often completely silent. My world didn't end with a bang or a scream. It ended with the quiet tap of a finger on a screen, under the cold, sterile glow of the family iPad. The house was asleep, wrapped in that deep suburban quiet you only find outside a city like Denver. The only sounds were the gentle hum of the refrigerator and the whisper of the furnace kicking on, pushing warm air against the lingering Rocky Mountain chill. I was just looking for a buttermilk pancake recipe for the kids, a small domestic task for the morning. That's when the notification banner slid down from the top of the screen. An email. The subject line read, "Your reservation is confirmed. The Ritz-Carlton, Bachelor Gulch." My first thought was spam, a phishing attempt. Adrian, my husband, was too practical for a spontaneous Ritz-Carlton booking, but curiosity is a powerful thing. I tapped it open. The confirmation was pristine, professional. 1 king suite, mountain view, check-in, Saturday. Adrian's name was right there at the top. My breath caught, a small, sharp snag in my chest. A surprise for me? The thought flickered and died almost instantly. His 38th birthday was this week, not mine. And then I saw it. A single, damning line of text near the bottom, the kind you'd normally scroll right past. This confirmation was forwarded to stella.harrison@gmail.com. Stella. The name didn't just register in my mind, it felt like a physical blow. The air rushed out of my lungs, leaving a hollow, ringing void. The kitchen around me seemed to recede, the granite countertops and stainless steel appliances fading into a blurry tunnel. All that existed was that name on the screen. Stella. My Stella. My best friend, since our freshman year of college. The woman who held my hand when I was in labor with my son. Aunt Stella to my children. My other half. The cold that started in my fingertips began to spread, a venomous frost creeping up my arms and into my heart. I sat there, paralyzed, the pancake recipe forgotten, the silence of my perfect home suddenly screaming with betrayal. Just 1 week earlier, that same silence had felt like peace. Our life, nestled in a pristine Highlands Ranch community south of Denver, was a carefully curated masterpiece of American success. From our 2-story craftsman-style house, you could see the mountains etched against the sky, their peaks turning a soft alpenglow pink at sunset. We had the life people moved to Colorado for. The crisp, pine-scented air, the weekend hikes on trails just miles from our door, the craft breweries where other young families gathered on sunny afternoons. We had 2 beautiful children, Leo, my thoughtful 8-year-old who could spend hours cataloging his dinosaur figures, and Mia, my 5-year-old little bird, who narrated her entire life through song. And at the center of it all was Adrian. On the cusp of 38, he was the picture of success, a senior financial consultant with a sharp mind and a smile that could disarm a boardroom. He had that easy, athletic confidence that came from a life of things going his way. I loved the way he'd come home, loosen his tie, and immediately get down on the floor to build a Lego tower with the kids. I was so proud of the life we had built. It was solid, it was real. Or so I thought. Our world was a trinity. Me, Adrian, and Stella. She wasn't just a friend, she was woven into the very fabric of our family. She was there for every birthday, every holiday, every scraped knee, and every school play. When I started my freelance writing business from home, she was my biggest cheerleader. Her laughter was the soundtrack to our summer barbecues. There was no us without her. I felt a gratitude for it all so deep it was almost painful. Have you ever had a moment in your life that felt so perfectly complete, you were almost afraid to breathe, scared you might break the spell? It's a terrifying, beautiful feeling, and looking back, I realize it's the quiet hum of the universe right before the lightning strike. That perfect life, the one I had so carefully built and curated, reached its absolute zenith at Adrian's 38th birthday party. It was its highest, most sunlit, most beautifully deceptive moment, right before it plunged off the edge of a cliff. We held it in our backyard in early September, on one of those magical Colorado evenings when the summer heat finally gives way to a crisp, mountain air that smells of pine and approaching autumn. I'd spent weeks planning it, I'd strung up Edison bulbs that cast a warm, golden glow over the flagstone patio, their light glinting off the wine glasses and silverware. The caterers had set up a grill station, sending the scent of sizzling cedar plank salmon into the air, and our fire pit was crackling, a gathering point for friends wrapped in cozy blankets. In the distance, the Rockies were a jagged, purple silhouette against a sky streaked with orange and pink. It was almost painfully picturesque. Our friends were all there, the work crowd from Adrian's firm, looking a little less stressed without their lanyards and spreadsheets, the neighbors from our cul-de-sac, who had become our weekend family, and of course, Stella. She was magnificent, as always, moving through the party like a second host. She'd arrived early with a ridiculously expensive bottle of scotch for Adrian and a bouquet of wildflowers for me. She refilled drinks, laughed her loud, infectious laugh, and charmed everyone she spoke to. At one point, I saw her helping my son, Leo, toast a marshmallow over the fire pit, her head tilted just so, her expression one of pure affection. The sight warmed me. My husband, my children, my best friend, my whole world, safe and happy in my backyard. Adrian was in his element. He loved being the center of attention, and tonight he was the king. He moved through the crowd with an easy grace, one hand holding a glass of bourbon, the other clapping a friend on the back. He looked so handsome in a dark blue button-down that made his eyes look even brighter. After we cut the cake, a decadent chocolate stout creation from a local bakery, he tapped a fork against his glass for a toast. He thanked everyone for coming, then he turned to me. "And to my beautiful wife, Olivia," he said, his voice ringing with what I thought was genuine sincerity. "The architect of all of this. My rock. I love you." Everyone cheered. He leaned in and kissed me. And for that one brilliant, shimmering moment, I felt like the luckiest woman alive. My heart was so full I thought it might burst. About an hour later, when the party was in full, cheerful swing, he came up behind me while I was talking to a neighbor and put his hands on my waist. "Hey," he whispered in my ear, his breath warm. "Come with me for a second. I want to show you the watch my parents sent." It felt like a sweet, private moment in the middle of a crowd. I excused myself and followed him inside, through the kitchen and into our mudroom, a space I'd meticulously designed with built-in cubbies for the kids' backpacks and a bench for taking off snowy boots. It was the most organized, domestic, and non-threatening room in the house. He closed the door behind us, muffling the sounds of the party to a dull thrum. He didn't mention a watch. Instead, he took both of my hands in his, looking down at me with an intensity that felt off. "You know I love you, right? You know you're my everything." My heart did a little flutter. "Of course I do," I said, smiling. "I love you too. Happy birthday." He squeezed my hands. "Good," he said, almost to himself. "So, for my birthday, I've been thinking, I want something unconventional, something for me, for us, really." He paused, and a strange, almost boyish grin played on his lips. "I want a hall pass." The words just hung there in the air, absurd and out of place, like a typo in the middle of a beautiful poem. I laughed, a nervous, confused puff of air. "A what? What is this? 2004. Did you just watch an old Owen Wilson movie?" I was waiting for him to laugh with me, to say it was a stupid joke, but he didn't. His eyes were deadly serious. "I'm not kidding, Liv. Just once. One night. No strings, no emotions. It's a guy thing. A way to, I don't know, blow off some steam before I hit 40. It could even be good for us. Spice things up." My smile froze and then melted off my face. The organized, perfect little room suddenly felt like it was tilting, the floor unstable beneath my feet. The happy chatter from the party outside faded into a distant, meaningless roar. I stared at the man I had built my entire life with, and for the first time, I felt like I was looking at a complete stranger. I had to go back to the party. For another hour, I floated through my own home like a ghost, my face frozen in a smile that felt like a cheap plastic mask. I refilled wine glasses, asked people about their kids, and laughed at jokes I didn't hear, all while a silent scream was tearing through my insides. The golden glow of the Edison bulbs now seemed harsh and interrogating. The cheerful music sounded like a cacophony of noise. I watched Adrian across the yard, effortlessly charming, completely unaware or perhaps unconcerned that he had just detonated a bomb in the center of our lives. I saw Stella come up and hug him, wishing him a happy birthday, and a wave of nausea so profound washed over me I had to grip the edge of a table to steady myself. The whole scene felt like a dolly painting vibrant, surreal, and deeply, deeply wrong. When the last guest finally trickled out the door, the silence they left behind was deafening. It was thick with everything that hadn't been said. The beautiful, festive scene was now just a mess of dirty plates, half-empty bottles, and crumpled napkins. The remnants of a life that, just a few hours ago, I believed was mine. I started clearing plates, my movements sharp and jerky. The clatter of ceramic against the granite countertop was the only sound, a punctuation mark for my rage. Adrian came in, loosening his tie. A weary but satisfied host. "Great party, huh?" he said, as if nothing had happened. That was it. The dam broke. I slammed a stack of plates down on the counter, the sound making him flinch. "We need to talk about what you said in the mudroom, Adrian. Right now." I gave him an opening, a chance to undo it. I desperately wanted him to say he was drunk, that it was the stupidest thing he'd ever said, that he was horrified and deeply sorry. But that's not what he did. He sighed, a long put-upon sound, and leaned against the island. "Babe, come on. It was nothing." It was party talk. I'd had a few too many scotches. "You're not actually going to make a big deal out of this, are you?" He was minimizing, making me the unreasonable one. The anger in my chest turned from a hot coal to a roaring fire. "A big deal?" I repeated, my voice dangerously low. "You asked for my permission to sleep with someone else for your birthday, and you don't think that's a big deal?" He had the audacity to look exasperated. "See? This is what I'm talking about," he said, shaking his head. "You can't just let things go anymore. You're always so tense, so serious. Ever since the kids were born, we've lost our spark. I was just throwing out a crazy idea, a way to maybe bring some of that excitement back." It was a masterclass in manipulation, a seamless pivot from his grotesque request to my perceived failings as a wife. He was framing his betrayal as a symptom of my inadequacy. It's a terrifying thing when you realize the person you trust most in the world is trying to convince you that your own feelings are not just wrong, but are actually the source of the problem. Let me know if you've ever been in one of those crazy-making conversations. It is a kind of psychological vertigo, a loneliness so profound it feels like you're floating alone in space. "So this is my fault now?" I shot back, my voice rising. "Because I'm tired from raising the children we both wanted, because I'm focused on the life we're supposed to be building, you think the solution is for you to go have sex with a stranger? You didn't ask to go to a couple's retreat. You didn't ask for a weekend away, just the two of us. You asked to cheat, but you wanted me to bless it first so you wouldn't have to feel guilty. That isn't about excitement, Adrian. That's about cowardice." He flinched, his own anger finally showing. "You know what, Olivia? This is why I don't tell you things, because I know you'll just turn it into a weapon. I try to be transparent, to share some stupid, fleeting thought I had, and you act like I've committed a crime. I can't even be honest in my own home." He was playing the victim now, painting himself as the misunderstood husband, punished for his vulnerability. But I wasn't buying it. I saw him, truly saw him, for the first time in a long time. The charming, successful man was gone. In his place was someone small, selfish, and cruel. The fight didn't end. It just fizzled out into a cold, toxic silence. He grabbed a pillow from the couch and headed to the guest room without another word. I was left standing alone in the wreckage of his party, the smell of stale wine and burnt-out candles filling the air. The chasm that had opened between us in the mudroom now felt vast and uncrossable. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that some things, once broken, could never be put back together again. The days following the party were a masterclass in psychological warfare. A cold war descended upon our beautiful home, the silence so thick and heavy you could feel it in your bones. We moved around each other like ghosts, our conversations reduced to clipped, logistical necessities. "Did you pick up the dry cleaning? Leo has soccer practice at 6. We're out of milk." We were two actors performing a play of domestic normalcy for an audience of 2 small children, but backstage, the set was on fire. Adrian wore an air of wounded arrogance, a man deeply offended that his wife had failed to appreciate his progressive, open-minded thinking. He was giving me the silent treatment, a punishment for my supposed crime of ruining his birthday with my feelings. His refusal to apologize, his doubling down on this cold indifference, began to work on me. It was insidious. In the quiet, lonely hours after the kids were in bed, a sliver of doubt would creep in. Was I the one who was crazy? Was I the uptight, sexless wife he'd hinted at? Had I, in my exhaustion and the endless churn of motherhood, lost my sense of humor, my sense of adventure? He was so confident in his indignation that he almost had me convinced I was the villain in our story. I found myself replaying his words, searching for the logic in his madness. I felt untethered, questioning my own reality. It was a terrifying, disorienting place to be, and I was on the verge of apologizing to him just to make the crushing silence go away. And then came Saturday morning, the weekend of his birthday proper. Adrian had been gone since dawn, telling me he was heading up to the mountains with some buddies for a birthday golf game in Beaver Creek. The lie was so smooth, so plausible. I even felt a pang of guilt for the fight, for sending him off into his birthday weekend under such a dark cloud. I was determined to make it a normal, happy day for the kids. I put on a playlist of their favorite Disney songs. I pulled out the griddle, the bag of flour, the buttermilk. I was going to make those pancakes. It felt like a small act of defiance, a way to reclaim my home from the tension that had taken it hostage. Leo and Mia were watching cartoons in the living room, their laughter a welcome sound in the oppressive quiet. I grabbed the family iPad off the charger to pull up the recipe I'd been looking for a few nights before. And that's when I saw it. The email notification was still there, an unread badge glowing like a warning light. Your reservation is confirmed. The Ritz-Carlton, Bachelor Gulch. Bachelor Gulch. Right next to Beaver Creek. The air in my lungs turned to ice. This wasn't spam. This was his plan. My hands were shaking, but I tapped it open. King Suite. Check-in. Friday. Yesterday. Check-out. Sunday. Tomorrow. He was there right now. All the pieces clicked into place with a horrifying, sickening snap. The fight, his coldness, his gaslighting, it wasn't about a hypothetical pass. It was about a real, premeditated trip. He wasn't asking for permission. He was manufacturing a fight to justify what he was already planning to do. And then, my eyes landed on that final, devastating line. Forwarded to stella.harrison@gmail.com. The truth hit me with the force of a physical impact. It wasn't just some random woman. He hadn't gone to find a stranger. He had taken my best friend, the woman I loved like a sister. The floor seemed to drop away, and the only thing holding me up was the kitchen counter. I was gripping so hard my knuckles turned white. He walked in the door late that afternoon, tanned from a day in the mountain sun, feigning a slight limp. Course was brutal today, he said, dropping his golf bag. He was expecting the same cold, silent wife. He was not expecting to see me sitting at the kitchen table, the iPad perfectly centered on the polished wood, the email displayed on the screen. I didn't say a word. I just looked at him. I watched the blood drain from his face, the casual arrogance replaced by a panicked, cornered animal look in his eyes. "What is that?" he stammered, his voice suddenly thin. "It's your hotel confirmation," I said, my own voice eerily calm. "For your golf trip, the one you forwarded to Stella." He opened his mouth, and a torrent of pathetic lies spilled out. "It's not what it looks like. We were just joking around. We booked it as a gag and then canceled." I just stared at him. "The check-in was yesterday, Adrian. And your credit card was charged this morning." I called. The lie died on his lips, replaced by a desperate, pleading look. He finally broke, sinking into a chair. "Okay," he whispered, not looking at me. "Okay, it happened. Just once. Last night. It didn't mean anything, Liv. I swear. It meant nothing. But it wasn't nothing. It was everything. And the truth of it, finally spoken aloud, was uglier and more devastating than anything I could have ever imagined. It meant nothing. The 3 words hung in the air of my sun-drenched kitchen, more toxic than nerve gas. Nothing. He had taken 12 years of marriage, a decade of shared history, the sacred trust of our family, and the woman I considered a sister, wrapped it all up in a weekend of sordid lies at the Ritz-Carlton, and dismissed it as nothing. It was in that moment, listening to him try and minimize the shrapnel he'd just lodged in my heart, that the hurt began to crystallize into something else, something cold, hard, and immovably clear. All the confusion, the self-doubt he had so skillfully planted in my mind over the past week, it all evaporated. This wasn't a man who had made a simple mistake. A mistake is taking a wrong turn on the highway. A mistake is forgetting to pick up milk. This was a calculated campaign of deception. He had looked me in the eye and lied about a golf trip. He had conspired with my best friend. He had orchestrated a fight to make me feel crazy, to provide himself with a flimsy justification for a betrayal he was already planning. He hadn't just cheated on me. He had tried to rewrite my reality, to make me believe that his poison was my fault. And in dismissing it all as nothing, he was showing me exactly how much I meant to him. Nothing. I think there's a moment in every true crisis when the fog of pain and shock suddenly clears, and you see the one single path you have to take to save yourself. It's not a path you want to take. It's terrifying, it's covered in thorns, and you know it leads into a dark, unknown forest. But you also know that staying where you are means certain death. Have you ever had a moment like that? A moment of terrible clarity, when you knew exactly what you had to do, no matter how much it scared you? It's the most frightening and the most liberating feeling in the world. My body moved before my mind gave the full command. I stood up from the kitchen table, my spine straight, my hands steady. The tears I thought would come were nowhere to be found. They had been replaced by a resolve so absolute it felt like steel reinforcing my bones. Adrian was starting to launch into a new wave of excuses, his voice taking on that pleading, pathetic tone. "Liv, please. Don't look at me like that. We can fix this. I know we can. We'll go to counseling. We'll do whatever it takes. Don't throw away 12 years for one stupid, meaningless." "Stop," I said. The word was quiet, but it cut through his rambling like a shard of glass. He fell silent. "Do not," I continued, my voice level and cold, "say that word to me again. This was not meaningless. This was a choice, 1,000 choices. You chose to lie, you chose to plan, and you chose her. The one person on this earth you knew would destroy me." He took a step toward me, his hands outstretched. "Olivia, I'm so sorry. Please." I took a step back, holding up my hand. "I want you to go upstairs and pack a bag." His face crumpled in disbelief. "What?" "No. Babe, come on, let's just talk this through." "There's nothing to talk through," I said, my voice unwavering. "You have forfeited the right to be in this house, with these children, with me. Pack a bag, Adrian. I want you out. Tonight." The disbelief on his face hardened into anger. He was losing control, and he hated it. "You can't be serious," he scoffed. "You can't just kick me out. This is my house, too, in case you forgot." "Then I will take Leo and Mia, and we will go to a hotel," I countered instantly. The thought had formed, complete and absolute, in a split second. "But I will not spend another night under the same roof as you. One of us is leaving this house in the next hour, and if you make this any more difficult for me or for our children, I promise you, the very next phone call I make will be to a divorce attorney. The choice is yours." He stared at me, searching my face for a crack, a sign of weakness he could exploit. He found nothing. All the warmth, all the softness he had taken for granted for 12 years was gone. All that was left was a stranger made of ice and iron. The fight drained out of him, replaced by a sullen, bitter acceptance. He turned without another word and walked up the stairs. I stood motionless in my beautiful broken kitchen, listening to the quiet, methodical sounds of drawers opening and closing. The sound of my life being packed into a duffel bag. He was gone. The front door clicked shut, and the absence he left behind was a physical presence, a vacuum that sucked the warmth and air out of every room. I walked through the house in a daze, my feet carrying me through the familiar spaces that now felt alien and vast. I saw the indentation his head had left on the pillow on his side of the bed. I saw his favorite coffee mug, left by the sink from that morning. Each object was a tiny monument to a life that no longer existed. That night, I didn't sleep. I just lay there, listening to the house settle, the unfamiliar sounds of a life suddenly cut in half. The immediate, adrenaline-fueled fury of the confrontation had faded, leaving behind the deep, throbbing ache of the wound itself. I had won the battle, but now I was alone on the battlefield, and the scope of the war ahead was just beginning to dawn on me. The next morning, the doorbell rang. It was a bright, sunny Colorado Sunday, the kind of day that felt like a personal insult. I knew who it was before I even checked the camera feed on my phone. It had the grim inevitability of a storm arriving after the forecast. Stella. She stood on my porch, a ghost of the vibrant woman I knew. Her face was puffy and blotchy, her usually perfect hair was scraped back in a messy bun, and she was wearing a faded college sweatshirt, a relic from a time when our friendship felt simple and unbreakable. In her hands, she clutched a white bakery box, tied with a string, a pathetic peace offering from the little French place downtown where we used to celebrate our birthdays. I opened the door but stood firmly in the doorway, blocking the entrance. This was my home, a space she had violated. She would not cross its threshold again. "Olivia," she breathed, a torrent of frantic words and ragged sobs spilling out of her. "Liv, thank God. Please, you have to let me explain. It wasn't what it looked like. I was going to tell you. I swear." She took a step forward, and I held up my hand, stopping her. She flinched as if I'd struck her. "Explain what, Stella?" I asked, my voice devoid of any emotion. It was flat, clinical. "Explain the part where you sat at my kitchen table last week, drinking my coffee, asking about my kids' school pictures, all while you were planning a romantic getaway with my husband? Or the part where you let me cry to you on the phone after the party about the fight we had, pretending to be my friend?" "No, it wasn't like that," she insisted, tears streaming down her face. "He told me you were considering it. He said you two had talked about opening up the marriage, that you'd said maybe." He made it sound like I was okay with it? I finished for her. The lie was so audacious, so perfectly crafted to manipulate both of us, that for a second, all I felt was a sort of stunned admiration for Adrian's depravity. But it passed quickly. "And you believed him? Or was it just easier to believe him? They say to keep your friends close and your enemies closer. But what happens when they become the same person? There is a unique kind of devastation that comes from being betrayed by someone who knows all of your secrets, all of your vulnerabilities. It's like they have a map to every weak point in your heart, every old wound, and they know exactly where to press to cause the most pain. If you know that feeling, you know it's a scar that never truly fades." "I hate myself, Liv," she whispered, her body seeming to fold in on itself. "I was lonely and stupid, and he paid attention to me. It was only that one time. I knew it was a mistake the second it happened. Please don't hate me. I can't lose you." For 15 years, this woman's tears would have broken my heart. I would have wrapped my arms around her and told her we could fix anything. But I looked at her now, and I felt nothing. The well of my empathy for her had run completely dry. "I don't have the energy to hate you, Stella," I said, and it was the honest truth. Hate is a feeling, and what I feel for you is a void, an absence. All the energy I have left is going to be used to protect my children and myself from the mess that you and Adrian created, and that starts now. I looked at her, this stranger on my doorstep who wore the face of my best friend. "Goodbye, Stella." I closed the door. I didn't slam it. It was a quiet, deliberate click, the sound of a final, irrevocable ending. I leaned my forehead against the cool wood, my body trembling with a sorrow so deep it felt bottomless. On the other side of the door, I could hear her start to sob, a desperate, wrenching sound. I had now, in the span of less than 24 hours, surgically removed the two most significant adult relationships in my life. It wasn't a victory, it was an amputation. And I was left standing in the terrifying, silent aftermath, utterly and completely alone. After the click of the door sealing my old life out, a quiet so profound fell over the house that I could hear the blood pulsing in my ears. The adrenaline that had carried me through two of the hardest conversations of my life vanished, and my bones suddenly felt as though they were made of lead. I slid down the back of the door until I was sitting on the cold hardwood floor of the entryway, my arms wrapped around my knees, trying to hold myself together as the aftershocks began to rip through me. The full weight of my new reality came crashing down. I was alone. Adrian was gone. Stella was gone. The two people who had been the central pillars of my adult life, the co-authors of my story, had been amputated in a single, brutal weekend. The grief was a physical thing, a crushing pressure on my chest that made it hard to breathe. And right behind the grief came the fear. It was a cold, creeping terror that started in my stomach and spread through my limbs. How was I going to do this? How would I tell the children that their father wasn't coming home? How would I explain that Aunt Stella wouldn't be coming over for movie nights anymore? The practicalities of it all swarmed me, a plague of terrifying questions. The mortgage on this house was substantial, predicated on two high incomes. My freelance writing paid well, but could it cover everything? The car payments, the insurance, the endless hungry maw of groceries and utility bills and kids' activities? I felt a wave of vertigo, the kind you get when you're standing on the edge of a cliff, the ground crumbling beneath your feet. For a moment, I felt completely and utterly powerless, a victim drowning in the wreckage of a life I hadn't even steered. And then, in the depths of that despair, a voice cut through the noise. It wasn't my voice. It was sharp, practical, and laced with the faint, no-nonsense accent of the Midwest. It was my grandmother's voice, Eleanor. She had passed away 3 years ago, but in that moment she was as real as the floor beneath me. I saw her in my mind's eye, sitting at her kitchen table, her hands, wrinkled but strong, wrapped around a cup of black coffee. I was 25, giddy with my recent engagement to Adrian, showing off my new ring. She had admired it, and then she had looked me dead in the eye. "Love is a wonderful thing, Olivia," she'd said, her voice leaving no room for argument. "But love doesn't pay the bills, and it won't keep you warm if the furnace breaks. You are a smart girl. Never ever make yourself financially dependent on anyone. A woman must always have her own key, to her own door. You must always have an escape route." Her words brought back another memory, this one from the reading of her will. The family lawyer, a stuffy man named Mr. Abernathy, had explained the terms of the trust she'd left for me. It was a sizable amount, $500,000. It had seemed like an impossible fortune, but the terms were peculiar, something she had insisted upon. The principal was locked. I could draw on the interest, but I couldn't touch the bulk of it until one of two things happened. I turned 45, or my marriage was legally dissolved due to proven infidelity on the part of my spouse. I remember feeling a prickle of indignation at the time, a silent offense on Adrian's behalf. It felt like a distrustful, archaic clause from another era. My grandmother had seen the look on my face. She just patted my hand and said, "I hope you never have to use it, my love." But hope is not a financial plan. Sitting there on the floor, the echo of her words felt like a lifeline thrown into a raging sea. It was an escape route. It was a key. My grandmother, in her infinite, pragmatic wisdom, had seen a future I could not. She had provided for me, not just with money, but with a weapon. It wasn't just a safety net, it was a war chest. The fear didn't vanish, but it began to recede, replaced by a slow, rising tide of resolve. The questions that had been paralyzing me a moment before now had answers. How will you do this? With her help, can you afford the house? I could fight for it. How will you survive? I would do more than survive. I would rebuild. I pushed myself up off the floor, my movements no longer aimless. The tears were gone. I walked into my office, the small room where I had been slowly building a career for myself, and pulled a heavy file box from the closet labeled Family Documents. I sifted through the files until I found it, a thick vellum envelope containing my grandmother's will and trust documents. Tucked inside was the business card for Mr. Abernathy's law firm. I picked up my phone, my fingers steady, and found the number. My thumb hovered over the screen, the green call button glowing with promise. The grief was still there, a giant hole in the center of my life, but it was no longer the only thing I felt. For the first time since I'd seen Stella's name on that email, I felt a flicker of power. That phone call was the first step onto a road I never intended to travel. The weeks that followed were a blur of sterile lawyers' offices, beige conference rooms with bad abstract art on the walls, and stacks of paper that threatened to swallow my kitchen table. The warm, intimate language of our marriage, the inside jokes, the pet names, the whispered "I love yous" was replaced by the cold, brutal vocabulary of its dissolution. Petitioner, respondent, division of assets, custody schedule. Our life together was being dissected and itemized like an estate sale, each memory assigned a potential monetary value. It was a soul-crushing process, but a necessary one. My lawyer, a woman named Catherine Davies with sharp eyes and a calming, steady voice, listened to my story without a flicker of judgment. When I told her about my grandmother's trust fund and the infidelity clause, she gave me a slow, appreciative nod. "Eleanor was a very smart woman," she said simply. "That trust fund changed the entire dynamic of the proceedings. I wasn't a desperate wife pleading for scraps from the table of her marriage. I was a client with resources. I was a force to be reckoned with, and I would need to be. Adrian, true to form, decided to play games. As a financial consultant, he believed he was the smartest person in any room, especially when it came to money. He thought he could outmaneuver me, bury me in paperwork, and hide assets in accounts so complex I would simply give up. The first round of his financial disclosures arrived, a thick manila envelope of lies. On paper, he made himself look like he was barely solvent. His bonus from last quarter was mysteriously missing. An investment account we had often discussed for the kids' college fund was suddenly valued at a fraction of what I knew it was worth. It was a blatant, insulting attempt to cheat me and his own children out of the future we were legally owed. He underestimated me. He saw the wife who organized playdates and remembered his dry cleaning. He saw the freelance writer who worked from a corner of the bedroom. He assumed I was financially naive. He didn't see the woman who had balanced our family's checkbook to the penny for the last decade. He didn't see the daughter of a woman who taught her to read a stock ticker. And he certainly didn't see the granddaughter of Eleanor. There is a unique and formidable power in being underestimated, in letting people's limited perception of you become your greatest secret weapon. Tell me about a time you completely shattered someone's low expectations of you. It's a quiet, personal victory that often tastes sweeter than any loud public triumph. I took the documents to Catherine's office and spread them across her mahogany desk. "He's lying," I said simply. "I don't know exactly where it is, but there's more. A lot more." She reviewed the papers, her lips pursed in a thin line. "He's being clever," she admitted, "hiding money in multiple accounts, possibly in a shell corporation. Unraveling this would require a forensic accountant. It's expensive, Olivia. It can run into the tens of thousands of dollars." This was the moment he was counting on. The moment I was supposed to flinch, to back down, to accept the crumbs he was offering because the fight was too expensive. But all I could hear was my grandmother's voice. "Hope is not a financial plan." I looked Catherine straight in the eye, my voice as steady as the mountains outside her window. "Do it," I said. "Hire the best one you can find. I want you to find every single dollar he tried to hide from his children." The weeks that the accountant worked felt like a deep-sea excavation. They were a financial detective, following the faintest of trails, and what they found was breathtaking in its treachery. It wasn't just one hidden account, it was a carefully constructed web of deceit. A separate brokerage account opened 8 months ago, right around the time he had started acting distant. Significant funds funneled into an LLC with a generic name, registered in Delaware. He had even been overpaying his corporate American Express bill by thousands each month, later receiving reimbursement checks which he deposited into an account I never knew existed. The deception hadn't started with Stella, it had started long before, with a quiet, systematic financial betrayal. He wasn't just trying to leave me, he was trying to leave me with nothing. Catherine presented the findings to me in a thick, 3-ring binder. It was a detailed, undeniable map of his greed and deceit. As I turned the pages, I didn't feel the thrill of victory. I felt a profound, bottomless sadness for the man my husband had become. But beneath the sadness, a foundation of resolve was setting. The game was over. I now held the truth in my hands, and the truth, I was beginning to learn, was the ultimate form of power. The thick binder from the forensic accountant sat on the corner of my desk like a dormant volcano, a testament to the high-stakes war I was waging in courtrooms and conference rooms. It was a world of strategy, leverage, and cold, hard facts. But that war, the one fought by lawyers in $1,000 suits, was a distant, abstract thing compared to the battles I was fighting every single day on the home front. Life doesn't pause for a divorce, it just gets harder. The grand, cinematic drama of the betrayal settled into the relentless, grinding exhaustion of single motherhood. My days began at 5 a.m., in the cold, pre-dawn darkness of my quiet house. I'd make a pot of coffee and steal 2 precious hours of freelance work before the kids woke up, my fingers flying across the keyboard, my mind already swimming in deadlines. Then, at 7 a.m., the house would explode into the familiar chaos of a family morning. Only now, I was the sole manager of that chaos. I was the one finding the missing sneaker, negotiating the color of the socks, breaking up a fight over the last waffle, and packing lunches, all while trying to remember if it was library day or gym day. I was a one-woman army, and by the time I dropped them off at school, I already felt like I'd worked a full day. The hardest part was the children. They were navigating the wreckage of our marriage alongside me, but without a map. Leo, my sensitive 8-year-old, grew quieter. His teacher sent a note home saying he'd been withdrawn, staring out the window during class. One night, as I was tucking him in, he asked the question I had been dreading, his voice small in the dark. "Is Daddy mad at us? Is that why he lives somewhere else now?" The innocence of the question was like a knife in my heart. I had to swallow the lump in my throat and give him the calm, reassuring answer he needed, telling him it was grown-up stuff, that they were both loved more than anything in the world, all while my own heart was screaming. Mia, at 5, regressed. She started having accidents at night and would wake up crying for me, clinging to me with a desperation that broke me. I was their rock, their safe harbor, but I felt like I was made of crumbling sandstone. I learned to cry in the shower, the sound of the water muffling my sobs. The custody schedule began, and with it came the awkward, heartbreaking ritual of the handoff. We met on Wednesdays and every other Friday in the parking lot of a sterile, neutral-ground Starbucks, halfway between my house and the apartment he'd rented. These exchanges were brief, tense, and transactional. We spoke only of logistics, our words clipped and devoid of any warmth. Mia has a slight fever. The Tylenol is in her backpack. Leo needs his diorama for his science project finished by Monday. He wouldn't look me in the eye. Since I'd uncovered his financial deceit, his resentment was a palpable thing. He was no longer my husband. He was a hostile business partner in the difficult project of raising our children. The worst part was watching their faces light up when they saw his car pull in. They would run to him, all hugs and excited chatter, and he would scoop them up, putting on the face of the fun, weekend dad. I'd get back in my car, wave a cheerful goodbye I didn't feel, and drive away, the silence of the empty vehicle pressing in on me. The silence in the car on the way home from a weekend drop-off is a very specific kind of quiet. It's the sound of your own heart, splintering a little more. For anyone out there navigating the treacherous waters of co-parenting, you know the unique pain of putting on that brave, smiling mask for your children when all you want to do is crumble. It's an act of love so fierce and so draining, and I am sending so much strength to you if you are in that place. You are not alone. I'd arrive back at the house, and the quiet I had craved all week would suddenly feel cavernous and hostile. The weekend would stretch out before me, a vast, empty expanse of time. The toys were tidy, the laundry was done, and there was no one to make dinner for. The first few times, the silence was so overwhelming I didn't know what to do with myself. The legal battle gave me a mission, a sense of purpose. But in these quiet, lonely moments, I was confronted with the true, staggering cost of my new freedom. It was the sound of my own loneliness. For the first few weekends, the kids were with Adrian. The silence in my house was a physical torment. It was a loud, ringing void that amplified every sad thought, every fear, every regret. I would wander from room to room, tidying things that were already tidy, trying to outrun the profound loneliness of a home without the sound of little feet or cartoon theme songs. The quiet was a constant reminder of what I had lost, of the family that had been shattered. I spent one entire Saturday afternoon on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, doing nothing but staring at the wall, feeling the full crushing weight of my grief. I let myself hit the bottom because I had a feeling that the only way out was to push off from the floor. That evening, as I was mindlessly scrolling through my phone, I saw an article shared by a friend. It was a generic list of tips about surviving divorce. It was full of useless platitudes about self-care and finding new hobbies. I remember feeling a surge of anger. This wasn't a spa day. This was a war. This wasn't about finding a new pottery class. It was about relearning how to breathe when the air had been stolen from your lungs. And in that moment of anger, something shifted. I thought of my work, the freelance articles I wrote for corporate clients about topics so bland they could put you to sleep. It was work that paid the bills, but it didn't feed my soul. And I realized that the crushing silence of my weekends wasn't just a void, it was a resource. It was time I could use to fight back, not just in the courtroom, but for my own future. My small office, a room I'd always treated as a secondary space, became my sanctuary. It became my command center. I started using those quiet hours with a ferocious, single-minded focus. Instead of writing another soulless blog post about optimizing supply chains, I started to write about what was real. I wrote about what I knew. I stayed up late, fueled by coffee and a burning need to make sense of the chaos. and I pitched an article to a major national parenting website. The title was The Cold Math of Co-Parenting: How to Split a Holiday Without Breaking Your Child's Heart. I pitched another to a women's magazine, Gaslighting Isn't a Disagreement: How to Know When a Fight is Actually a Form of Control. It was a strange and powerful alchemy, transmuting my deepest pain into prose. The act of organizing the mess in my head into clean, structured paragraphs was a form of therapy. It was a way of taking control of my own narrative. For the first time, I wasn't just a victim of my story, I was its author. Have you ever used a creative outlet, writing, painting, music, even cooking or gardening, to navigate a dark period in your life? I would love to hear what that was for you in the comments. There is something truly magical about how the act of creation can be the most powerful antidote to destruction. A few weeks later, an email landed in my inbox. The editor from the parenting site loved my pitch. They wanted a 2,000-word feature. Then, an old client, impressed by the new energy and sharpness in my work, offered me a long-term retainer contract that nearly doubled my monthly income. The article was published, and the response was overwhelming. My inbox filled with messages from women all across the country, women I'd never met, who wrote, "Thank you. I thought I was the only one, or your words made me feel seen for the first time in years. I was no longer just talking into the void of my empty house. I was connecting with a community. I was building a new foundation." The biggest change, however, was internal. About a month into this new reality, I was at a back-to-school night for Leo. One of the other mothers, a woman I'd known casually for years, asked me the standard question, "So, what is it you do, Olivia?" In the past, I would have mumbled something vague about doing some writing from home, but this time, I didn't hesitate. I stood up a little straighter, looked her in the eye, and said with a clarity that surprised even me, "I'm a writer." It was the first time I had said it out loud with such conviction. It was the first time it felt completely, undeniably true. In the midst of losing my identity as a wife, I was finally, truly, finding myself. Months bled into a year. The legal battle churned on, a slow, grinding machine that consumed time and money and emotional energy. My life had found a new, strange rhythm, a careful choreography between single parenthood and a burgeoning career. I was building something new, something that was entirely my own, and with each published article, each new client, I felt a piece of myself, a piece I didn't even know I'd lost, slowly coming back into focus. But there was one last major battle to be fought, one final piece of our shared past that had yet to be untangled: the house. We were in another soulless mediation room, the four of us, me, Adrian, and our respective lawyers sitting around a polished table that felt as wide as a canyon. The air was thick with a polite, manufactured civility that was far more unnerving than outright anger. We had already divided the bank accounts, split the investment portfolios thanks to my forensic accountant's report. I received more than he had initially intended and settled on a custody schedule that was, for the most part, working. The house was the last thing. To me, it was everything. It was the only home my children had ever known. It was the walls that held the echoes of their first words and the pencil marks on the doorframe charting their growth. It was the backyard where Leo learned to ride his bike and the kitchen where Mia and I baked cookies. It was my sanctuary, my office, my safe harbor in the storm. To Adrian, it was just an asset. His lawyer, a slick man with a predatory smile, made their position clear. The most equitable solution is to sell the property and split the proceeds. It's clean, it's simple. Mrs. Thompson obviously cannot afford the mortgage and upkeep on her own. Adrian just sat there, nodding in agreement, not even looking at me. He wanted to force me out, to sever my last tie to the life we had built. It was a final parting act of cruelty, a way to ensure that I was as displaced and unmoored as he was. I felt a surge of panic. The thought of packing my children's lives into boxes, of leaving the only stability they had left, because of his choices, felt like an unbearable injustice. For a moment, the exhaustion of the long fight washed over me, and I almost gave in. It would be easier to just walk away, to start fresh somewhere else. But then I thought of my grandmother. I thought of the late nights I'd spent at my desk, building my business word by word. I thought of the quiet pride I felt seeing my name in print. I was not the same woman who had collapsed on the floor a year ago. Catherine, my lawyer, must have seen the flicker of doubt on my face. She gave me a subtle, reassuring nod before turning to address Adrian's lawyer. "My client will not be selling the house," she stated, her voice calm and firm. Adrian let out a short, humorless laugh. "Oh, really?" he said, finally looking at me with a condescending smirk. "And how are you planning to do that, Olivia? You don't have the money to buy me out." Catherine smiled, a thin, sharp smile that didn't reach her eyes. She slid a folder across the polished table. "Actually," she said, "she does." Adrian's lawyer opened the folder. Inside was a formal, non-negotiable offer to purchase Adrian's full equity in the home, based on 2 independent appraisals. It was backed by a letter of credit from my bank, secured by my own income and the funds from my grandmother's trust. I watched Adrian's face as he read the document. I saw the condescending smirk falter, then vanish completely. I saw it replaced by disbelief, then a flicker of shock, and finally, something that looked almost like respect. He had been so sure of my weakness, so confident in my dependence on him. He had written me off. And he had been wrong. A house is just wood and nails and drywall, but a home is different. A home is where you feel safe. It's where your children's laughter echoes in the hallways. It's the one place in the world you can be completely, utterly yourself. What does the word home truly mean to you? Can you describe that feeling of safety and belonging in just a few words? For me, fighting for that house wasn't about winning or about property. It was about defending the heart of my family. Adrian had no choice but to accept. With the evidence of his financial fraud hanging over him, fighting it in court would have been a disaster for him. We signed the papers. That afternoon, I drove back from the lawyer's office. As I turned onto my street, our street, I saw my house, bathed in the warm Colorado Sunday. It was the same house, but it felt completely different. The weight of his presence, the ghost of our broken marriage, had been lifted. I pulled into the driveway, got out of the car, and just stood there on the lawn, looking at the porch swing and the big oak tree. This wasn't our house anymore. It was my home. And for the first time, I felt the solid ground of my new life firmly beneath my feet. The day we signed the final papers was a crisp, impossibly clear day in late October. The aspen trees in the mountains had already turned a brilliant, fiery gold, and the air had that clean, sharp edge that promises the first snow is not far off. The fight was over. The assets had been divided, the custody schedule was set, and the deed to my house was now solely in my name. All that was left was the final, official severing, a signature on a dotted line. We met at a neutral mediator's office downtown, a place with no history for either of us. I arrived a few minutes early and sat in the quiet waiting room, looking out the window at the city below. A year ago, a day like this would have terrified me. I would have been a bundle of raw nerves, sick with anxiety and grief. But as I sat there, all I felt was a profound sense of calm. I wasn't happy. I wasn't sad. I was simply still. I had walked through the fire and come out the other side, and I was no longer afraid of the heat. I had spent the last year building a new life, brick by painful, deliberate brick, and I was secure in the foundation I had laid. Adrian walked in, and for a moment, I was struck by how different he looked. The arrogant swagger was gone, replaced by a quiet weariness. He seemed smaller, somehow. The sharp, tailored edges of his personality had been worn down by the consequences of his own actions. He was no longer the larger-than-life villain of my story. He was just a man who had made a series of terrible choices and was now living with them. He gave me a brief, hesitant nod, and I nodded back. There was nothing left to fight about. We were led into a conference room and sat on opposite sides of a long, polished table. The final divorce decree lay between us, a thick stack of paper that represented the legal dismantling of our shared history. The mediator explained the finality of the document in a soft, somber voice. She pointed to the various places we needed to initial and sign. Signing your name on a divorce decree is one of the strangest, most surreal things you will ever do. Each stroke of the pen feels like it carries the weight of a decade, of children, of 1,000 shared moments, both good and bad. But it's also a profound act of liberation. It's the moment you stop being a character in a shared story and finally become the sole author of your own. What is one thing you've done in your life that felt like a scary but necessary new beginning? Sometimes the hardest goodbyes lead to the most beautiful hellos with yourself. I picked up the heavy, expensive-feeling pen. My hand was perfectly steady. As I signed Olivia Marie Thompson for the last time, I wasn't thinking about the betrayal or the lies. I was thinking about the woman I was a year ago, the one who had crumpled on the floor, feeling helpless and alone. And I was thinking about the woman I was now, a business owner, a homeowner, a mother who had proven to herself that she was strong enough to stand on her own. I was signing away my past, but I was also signing for my future. I pushed the document over to Adrian. He signed quickly, his signature a frantic, illegible scrawl. When it was done, we stood up, the lawyers exchanging files and handshakes. It was over. As we were walking out of the office, just before we went our separate ways, Adrian stopped and turned to me. "Liv," he said, his voice quiet, stripped of all its former defenses. "For what it's worth, I am truly sorry. For everything. For what I did to you, to Stella, to our family. I was a coward. A year ago, those words would have been everything I wanted to hear. I would have needed them to heal. But now, I realized I didn't. My healing was no longer dependent on his remorse. His apology was part of his journey, not mine. I looked at him, and for the first time, I felt a flicker of something like pity. "I know you are, Adrian," I said, "and I meant it. I hope you find some peace." I turned and walked away without looking back. I got into my car and sat for a moment, my hands on the steering wheel. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just took a deep, cleansing breath, the crisp autumn air filling my lungs. The chapter wasn't just closed. The book was finished, and a clean blank page was waiting. I put the car in drive and pulled out into the afternoon sun, heading home. Another year passed. The seasons in Colorado turned with a steady, reassuring rhythm, each one helping to soften the sharp edges of the past. The raw, gaping wound of the betrayal slowly began to scar over, no longer an immediate, agonizing pain, but a faded, silvery mark on the landscape of my life. It was a part of my story, a deep canyon I had been forced to cross, but it was no longer the place where I lived. The frantic, day-to-day struggle for survival had been replaced by something I hadn't dared to hope for, a quiet, steady, and deeply authentic sense of peace. I'm sitting on my porch swing now. It's a warm evening in late July, the kind where the sun takes its time sinking behind the mountains, painting the sky in lazy strokes of orange and purple. The air smells of freshly cut grass and the lavender I planted in the flower boxes along the railing. Leo, now nearly 10, is shooting hoops in the driveway, the rhythmic thump-thump-thump of the basketball, a familiar heartbeat for our evenings. Mia, who is 7 going on 17, is choreographing a complex dance routine on the lawn with the neighborhood cat as her unwilling partner. This is my life now. It's calm, it's happy, it's whole. I often think about the woman I was before all of this. The Olivia who measured her own worth by the success of her marriage and the happiness of her husband. The woman who was so terrified of rocking the boat that she almost missed that it was sinking. I feel a sense of tenderness for her, but she feels like a person from a black and white photograph, a distant ancestor I can't quite relate to anymore. The fire I walked through didn't just burn me, it forged me into someone new, someone stronger, someone who knows her own value, someone who is no longer afraid of the silence. In fact, some days I cherish it. It's a strange thing, looking back at a trauma that once felt like the defining event of your entire existence, and realizing it's now just a chapter in a much longer book. The scars are there, yes. They are a part of my story. But they don't hurt to the touch anymore. They've become a part of my own personal landscape, a reminder of the mountains I had to climb and the strength I didn't know I had. What is a challenge you've overcome in your life that you can now look back on, not just with sadness, but with a sense of pride for having survived it? It's such a powerful shift when you realize your past doesn't have to be a prison. It can be a source of your power. I don't think about Adrian or Stella much anymore. They are ghosts from a different life. I heard through a mutual acquaintance that they didn't last 6 months. Their relationship, built on a foundation of deceit and recklessness, apparently crumbled under the weight of reality. There was a time when hearing that would have brought me a sense of vindictive pleasure, but now it barely registered. Their story is not my story. Their choices are not my concern. The greatest freedom, I've learned, is genuine indifference. My life is full in a way it never was before. My writing career has blossomed. I've built a community of other writers, of other single moms, of strong, incredible women who lift each other up. My weekends are no longer empty voids, but are filled with hiking trips with the kids, farmers markets, and messy, chaotic pizza and movie nights where we all pile onto the couch under a mountain of blankets. We have created our own traditions, our own little universe of three that feels complete. Mia abandons her dance partner and comes running over, scrambling onto the swing next to me. She curls up under my arm, smelling of sunshine and grass. "Watch this, Mom." Leo yells from the driveway, and he sinks a perfect, clean shot through the hoop. He turns to me, his face beaming with pride. I smile and give him a thumbs up. He beams back. I wrap my arm tighter around Mia, pulling her close as the swing moves in a slow, gentle rhythm. This quiet, ordinary, beautiful moment. This is what I fought for. This is the peace I built from the ashes. It isn't the life I planned. It's something so much better. It's mine. As the last sliver of the sun disappears behind the mountains, the sky deepens into a rich, velvety indigo. The first stars begin to prick the darkness, sharp and brilliant in the clean Colorado air. The kids have gone inside now, their cheerful negotiations over bedtime stories and one last glass of water echoing softly through the open window. I'm alone on the swing, enveloped in the peaceful quiet of a summer night. A year or two ago, this solitude would have felt like a wound. Tonight, it feels like a gift. It's in these quiet moments that I can finally hear myself think, and I can see the whole, impossible journey for what it was. For so long, I thought my story was a simple one. A comfortable romance set in the suburbs. I was a wife, a mother, a friend. My role was to support the other characters, to keep the plot moving smoothly. I never imagined my life would have a plot twist like the one I endured. I never thought my story would become one of survival. But the most unexpected twist of all is that the survival story wasn't the end. It was just the messy, painful, and necessary second act. The third act, the one I'm living now, is a story about building. The worst thing that ever happened to me is the very thing that led me to the best version of myself. It's a terrible and beautiful paradox. The betrayal, the lies, the utter demolition of my life, it was all a fire that burned away a person I didn't even realize I was trapped inside. It burned away the insecurity, the dependence, the quiet fear of not being enough, and it revealed a foundation of strength I never knew I had. I learned that true strength isn't about being unbreakable. It's not about being fearless or never feeling pain. It's the opposite. It's about letting your heart break and then having the courage to painstakingly glue the pieces back together, knowing the cracks will always be a part of you. It's about crying in the shower and then walking out to make your children laugh. People sometimes ask me if I've forgiven them. It's a complicated question. I don't know if forgiveness is the right word. Forgiveness feels like something you give to someone else. What I've done is something for myself. I've released them. I've stopped allowing them to live, rent-free, in my head and in my heart. I've accepted what they did, and I've taken back the power it had over me. Their story continues somewhere else, and I genuinely wish them no ill will. But their story is no longer my business. My peace is no longer contingent on their apology or their remorse. And that is a freedom that tastes sweeter than any revenge. Adrian tried to make me a tragic footnote in the story of his midlife crisis. Stella tried to cast me as the collateral damage in her moment of weakness. But they made a critical mistake. They forgot that I was the one holding the pen. Remember, you are the narrator of your own life. You are the author, the editor, and the protagonist. No one else gets to write your ending unless you hand them the pen. If this story has resonated with you, if you believe in the profound power of rewriting our own narratives, consider supporting this channel with a super thanks. It's your support that allows me to continue sharing stories about the incredible, often quiet, strength it takes to turn an ending into a brand new beginning. I wouldn't wish my journey on my worst enemy, but I wouldn't trade the person I am today for anything. I am a mother, I am a homeowner, I am a successful writer, building a career on my own terms. I am a woman who knows her own worth, not because a man gives it to her, but because she has earned it. I look out at the stars, brighter now in the darkness, and I don't feel loss. I feel a deep, quiet gratitude, not for what happened to me, but for the person it forced me to become. The story isn't over. I feel like it's just getting started. The morning after a night of deep reflection is always different. The sun seems to hit the mountains at a new angle. I woke up this morning not to the heavy weight of memory, but to the simple, joyful chaos of my children trying to make their own breakfast. I came downstairs to find flour on the floor, a trail of milk across the counter, and two impossibly proud faces looking up at me over a bowl of what could charitably be called pancake batter. A few years ago, the mess would have stressed me out. This morning, I just laughed, grabbed an apron, and joined in. My life is now measured in these small, beautiful, imperfect moments. The legal battles, the mediation rooms, the nights spent crying on the floor, they feel like scenes from a movie I watched a long time ago, about a woman I used to know. The reality of my life is here, in this bright, messy kitchen, with the smell of burnt sugar and the sound of my daughter singing off-key. It's in the everyday business of living. And living, I've discovered, is a far more creative and rewarding act than simply surviving. On my desk in my office sits a thick, heavy stack of paper, over 300 pages, held together by a large binder clip. It's the manuscript for my first book. For 2 years, I poured every ounce of my pain, my anger, my hope, and my strength into those pages. It was the place I went to make sense of the senseless, to find my own voice in the cacophony of betrayal. Last month, after a dozen rejections, I sent it to a literary agent in New York that I was sure was a long shot. She called me last Tuesday. She wants to represent me. She thinks she can sell the book. The ultimate act of reclaiming my narrative isn't just telling it to myself anymore, it's sharing it with the world. Last weekend, I took the kids camping near the Maroon Bells, outside of Aspen. It was the first time we'd gone just the three of us. As we sat around a crackling campfire, roasting marshmallows under a thick blanket of stars that looked close enough to touch, Leo told a ghost story that was more funny than scary, and Mia fell asleep with her head in my lap. In that moment, surrounded by the immense, quiet beauty of the wilderness, I felt a sense of wholeness, so complete it almost made me weep. We were a family. Not a broken family, not a fractured unit, but a new kind of family, forged in resilience and defined by our own adventures. We were building a new album of memories, ones that had no ghosts, no shadows of the past. It's amazing how a physical space can transform alongside you. This house was once the stage for my greatest heartbreak, and for a long time, every corner held a memory I wanted to escape. But now, it's my fortress. I painted the front door a bright, cheerful teal last spring, a daily declaration of new beginnings. I tore out the perfectly manicured, boring shrubs Adrian had insisted on and planted a wild, chaotic garden of native Colorado wildflowers that attracts bees and hummingbirds. The house is louder now, filled more with laughter and music than with tense silence. It's no longer haunted. It is a home, vibrant and alive. If you are in the process of reclaiming your own space, whether that's an entire house or just a small corner of your own heart, I see you, and I am cheering for you. The work is hard, but the peace you build for yourself is worth every ounce of effort. I sit down at my desk, the happy sounds of the kids' breakfast experiment still coming from the kitchen. I look at the first page of my manuscript on the screen, the place where this whole new life began. I am not the woman who was betrayed. I am not the woman who survived a divorce. I am the woman who built this life, this career, this home. Every single part of it is mine. Mia runs in, a smudge of flour on her nose. "Mom, can we put sprinkles in the pancakes?" she asks, her eyes wide with hope. I turn away from the screen, away from the story of the past, and smile at my daughter. "Absolutely," I say. "It's a sprinkle kind of day." And so we leave her there, in the bright, hopeful morning of a life she built with her own 2 hands. Her story began with a quiet, devastating betrayal, but it did not end there. It became a story about the fierce, often unseen resilience of a woman redefining her own power. It's a reminder that sometimes the demolition of the life we thought we wanted is the only thing that can clear the ground for the life we were truly meant to live. It shows us that our deepest wounds can become the source of our greatest strengths, and that the most beautiful futures are often born from the most painful goodbyes. Her journey wasn't about revenge or winning, it was about reclaiming her home, her career, her peace, and most importantly, the pen to write her own story. Thank you so much for spending this time with me and for walking through this incredible journey of transformation. It's a privilege to share these stories with you. I would truly love to know where you are listening from in the world tonight. It's always so amazing to see how far these narratives can travel and how they can connect us, no matter the distance. Let's meet each other in the comments section. If this story resonated with you, and you believe in the power of sharing these experiences of strength and survival, you can support the channel by sending a super thanks. Your generous support is what makes it possible for me to continue finding and sharing more stories just like this one. Thank you for helping to keep this space alive. There are so many more stories of rebuilding and resilience waiting for you right here on the channel. You can see 2 new life stories on your screen right now that I highly recommend you watch next. And of course, if you haven't already, please don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next story we share together. Thank you again for your time and for your wonderful support. Take care of yourselves and each other. I'll see you in the next life story.